Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, fresh from the Thomas Drew practice fields over at the University of Alabama on another scorching afternoon. This one, a Saturday afternoon in Tuscaloosa, and once again, yes, very, very tough conditions out there. Nick Saban, for the third day in a row, put his team through its paces in real field temperatures of over 100 degrees. On the University of Alabama campus, but the Crimson Tide pushing through it, and not only doing it in heat, but also adding shoulder pads into the mix today as Alabama working out in shells, helmets, and shoulder pads for the first time in the 2016 preseason. So not a lot to talk about in terms of bad news, so that's a good thing, right? Haven't really noticed much in the way of injuries through the first 2 days. They still had some work to do over there today during today's practice, so we'll see how that goes. But so far, so good, knock on wood, right? That this team, after a scare early in camp last year, if you remember, Cam Robinson early on in camp had a scare with that knee, but nothing like that as of yet. So the Crimson Tide pretty much full go out there on a Saturday afternoon. Of course, tomorrow, a big, big day around the complex and at Bryant-Denny Stadium as Media Day and Fan Day come together in the annual open practice at Bryant-Denny Stadium. That'll get underway at 2:30 tomorrow afternoon, so if you have plans on coming to the Fan Day practice, that does start at 2:30. If you want Nick Saban's autograph, as we talked about yesterday, you better be in line already. As far as some areas of interest with this football team, I spent a lot of time around the defense today. You know, yesterday I was around the quarterbacks and the receivers, got a good look at those guys. I've seen the defensive backs for the last couple of days. Looks pretty much what you would expect there in the secondary, although we'll talk about that some as well. But we'll also take any questions you have right here on Facebook Live. So if you got something specific you want to ask, don't be afraid to go there. And I read these messages down here at the bottom. So if you have a player or an area of this team specifically that you would like to ask about, you can do that. And we'll do our best to get you the best answer we can. But yeah, as far as particular areas, that offensive line, obviously a big, not question mark, but a point of emphasis in trying to determine exactly what the right side of that offensive line is going to look like. Right now, today was the same as it was yesterday. I would say that you're looking at Ross Pierce-Baker once again at center, Bradley Bozeman at right guard, and the true freshman Jonah Williams at right tackle. A lot of guys jumping in, mixing, matching. Corin Curvin worked some beside Bradley Bozeman at right tackle today, so I wouldn't count the veteran out exactly at this point either. So a lot of mixing and matching. That left side is still what you would think, with Lester Cotton at left guard, Cam Robinson at left tackle. So there you go for your offensive line. As far as the tight ends, you know, I talked about them a little bit yesterday, but man, what an impressive looking group. You know, Alabama feels good about their scholarship tight ends when we're not seeing what we've seen in previous years, which is, you know, some defensive linemen coming over and working on at that position. I think with O.J. Howard and Hale Hentges and Miller Forrestall and another true freshman in Irv Smith Jr., they're in really, really good shape. And that's before you talk about a guy who is really an offensive tackle in tight end's clothing in Brandon Green, although I saw the big fella run a seam route yesterday in practice, made a nice play on. Kind of reminded me of that LSU game from a couple of years ago down in Baton Rouge. So they've got 5 tight ends that they feel like they can play with. You know, as far as I talked about being around the defensive line today, it's still status quo with the top guys in that mix. When you look at Deron Payne, he is the number 1 nose tackle. Just saw a question about that. I'll get to Terrell Hall here in a minute when we talk about the outside linebackers. But the defensive line, you know, Josh Frazier moving around pretty good out there too. He's right now the number 2 nose tackle. Although they could get creative with some of those ends if it came down to it. Dalvin Tomlinson might be able to play in there some. But the ends are still Jonathan Allen, Dalvin Tomlinson with Deron Payne with the first group, Deshaun Hand, Johnny Dwight, the ends with Josh Frazier with the second group, O.J. Smith is your third nose tackle. You also have Raekwon Davis working in there with that third group, the true freshman defensive end, Dakota Ball, who has played a couple of different positions for this team in recent years, most recently tight end. He's back with the defensive line in that next group. And then Jamar King and Quinnen Williams, too, a true freshman, is also in that third group. And Jamar King, the junior college transfer, he's out there. I think they're being a little bit cautious with him, which is understandable, because when you really think about it with Jamar King, this is a guy who just got to Tuscaloosa. You know, in this day and age, so many of these guys benefit from being on campus the 1st of June. At the latest, really. I mean, you've got a lot of guys that are here in January now when they enroll. So they get that fourth quarter program with Scott Cochran in January and February, and then they get spring practice, and then they roll right into the summer stuff. Well, even if you don't do that, you come in late May, and you still get the summer workouts, and you get sort of that indoctrination into the program over the summer. Well, Jamar King hasn't had any of that. You know, he had to take care of business academically, and so he's out there. As I said yesterday, I didn't really even notice him out there, but today I did see him. And he's in the group, but I think it's going to take a little time, and I think they understand that. And as hot as it is out there right now, think about that too. This guy comes from, I think, Northern California, and then walks into this heat. And not only the heat, okay, there is a tempo and pace at which Alabama practices at that is probably unsurpassed on just about any level of football. I don't care if you're talking National Football League. I don't care if you're talking about college, high school, whatever. Alabama's practices aren't the longest. They're not 3-4 hour practices. But in terms of pace and how quickly they go through their business, it's expeditious, I guess you could call it. Maybe that's too big a word for me to be throwing around. But it's quick, and it's moving, and it's constant. So, yeah, you think in Jamar King's situation coming into that, got to be tough. But again, I think if he can push through like the first week or so and sort of get himself acclimated, then we'll start to see maybe more of the guy that they need this year or could need this year. When you look at him, it's not like he's sloppy or overweight or anything like that. Again, I just got to think, in terms of cardio and all that it requires to practice out here with these guys, and then throw in real field temperatures of in excess of maybe 105 degrees for a guy who's not even used to that part of this part of the country. It's probably going to take a little time for Jamar King. Now, as far as the linebackers go, you're asking about some of the outside linebackers. Matt Womack, randomness right here. Matt Womack, the offensive lineman. I've seen him more on the left side so far, working with maybe the second or third group. He and Corin Curvin kind of been interchangeable. So I've seen him actually more on the left side, I think, so far through 3 practices, and it's different from last spring when he worked with the right side. But as for the linebackers, trying to switch back real quick to the other side of the ball, got a question about Terrell Hall, the true freshman. I've mentioned him since day one. The guy looks like a second or third year SEC player already. And watching him today, it was interesting because Tosh LaPoy was putting his guys through a drill that simulates dropping in pass coverage. And for 6'5", 245, or whatever he's listed at, Terrell Hall can move. I mean, he's just that kind of athlete. So we'll see once all the pads come on, and we'll even see some tomorrow, because if they're in shells, we'll see some pass rush drills and stuff like that gets a little physical. We'll see what he can do from that standpoint. But, man, just looking at this guy and watching him move through drills, yeah, he is exactly what they want at that jack linebacker position. Now, we all know that the top 2 guys are still Ryan Anderson and Tim Williams, and that's not changing. Those are the top 2 outside linebackers. But when you look at Christian Miller, you look at Anthony Jennings, who I'm not still sure is long-term an outside linebacker or defensive end, still a talented guy. You could see where they have the ability to take a guy like Rashaan Evans and play him at inside linebacker, which is where Evans still is, and working with Reuben Foster, Sean Dion Hamilton, Keith Holcomb. And it's that back 7 that's going to be interesting to watch during tomorrow's practice, because a lot of it's going to be pass-oriented stuff if it holds up to what previous fan day practices have been like. It's going to be a lot of throwing the football, which is going to be great when you're trying to figure out the quarterback situation and also some things in the secondary, and not just with the defensive backs, but who's going to be in there in the nickel with Reuben Foster at inside linebacker? Can Sean Dion Hamilton handle that, or is he pretty much a base inside linebacker? Is Rashaan Evans going to be the guy? That seems to be the sentiment right now. The feeling you get is that they're not investing all these reps in Rashaan Evans for him to be a backup at inside linebacker. There's a role there for Rashaan Evans, and I think we're going to find out exactly what that is probably here pretty soon. Keith Holcomb also in that mix, and that's before you get to the guys that have been around like Josh McMillan, Keaton Anderson. But those two true freshmen at inside linebacker too could surprise you and really come up with roles for themselves during the 2016 season when you talk about Ben Davis and Mack Wilson. Like I said about Hall a couple days ago, a couple guys that don't look like first-year SEC linebackers. So it'll be interesting to see how all those guys perform, more so in passing situations than anything, and that it does extend to the secondary. It looked like Hootie Jones is going to get a chance for that third safety job. We'll see. Deontay Thompson is still in that mix. Tony Brown is back there, but of course his status for the start of the season isn't promising at all. So Eddie Jackson and Ronnie Harrison, are your starters at safety, but they got to identify that third safety. Is it going to be Hootie Jones with Ronnie Harrison going back up to play the money position in the dime at corner? Still some things to figure out there. All three of the true freshman corner defensive backs that are available right now were at corner again today, by the way. I got a question earlier about Nigel Knott, and he's still not out there. And as Nick Saban said a few days ago, probably not going to be for a little while. So it's the other three that are out there, and all three, Aaron Robinson, Jared Maiden, and Shai Carter, were all with the corners again today. So Marlon Humphrey, obviously, Minkah Fitzpatrick are your starters. But they got to figure out a third corner there. Got to figure out the star position. Is it still going to be Minkah Fitzpatrick with maybe Anthony Averett or Kendall Sheffield coming on? Or is one of the young guys going to win that? So many different combinations, and really a good day to start to get a feel for that on Sunday, tomorrow, because it was in that practice a year ago, again, that we saw Minkah Fitzpatrick and Ronnie Harrison start to make a little bit of a move for those roles in 2015. So there you go. Any last-second questions here before we wrap up another edition of Instant Analysis on a steamy we're getting questions about maybe the running backs. I didn't really touch on them. They look good. Bo Scarborough's looking good out there. Looks like I don't know if he's lost any more weight, but he looks streamlined. He looks very athletic. Damian Harris looks good. We're going to see some of those freshmen tomorrow. That'll be fun to see, where they're at in different areas and maybe some of the physical attributes they bring to the game with Emons and Jacobs. I talked about Kendall Sheffield. He's still battling for one of those depth spots at corner. The Marks brothers, Xavier, I think, has got a great shot at returning kicks unless they go with Calvin Ridley. I would think Marks would be in that mix heavily, especially for punt returns. The O-line still figuring it out. The right side was once again today. Bradley Bozeman at right guard, Jonah Williams at right guard, but Corin Curvin I saw mixing there some. Shank Taylor's still out there, but I think Brandon Kennedy and some of these other guys, Dallas Warmack, may be more in the mix. Quarterback, we'll learn a lot tomorrow. As I said yesterday, you put these guys in the stadium, you give them a little bit more of a pressurized environment, and you see how they respond and how well they handle it. And watching them today, they're throwing the football very, very well in individual drills. And I'll say this for Cooper Bateman, and I know there's been talk about, the intermediate throws and the deep throws, but he dropped a dime to Calvin Ridley early in practice today on a deep ball. It was a beautiful throw. I already talked about the defensive backs. So if you didn't see any of these stuff that you're asking about right now, you can go back, and I'm pretty sure we covered it on this edition of Instant Analysis. Hope you have a great rest of the weekend. A lot of coverage coming your way, obviously, on Sunday. Charlie Potter doing a great job with content updates. I'll have stuff video-wise as well, some written stuff, some video. Instant Analysis tomorrow will come to you from Bryant-Denny Stadium